Nobody warned the most feared man in Seoul that an 8-year-old boy in a school vest and good trousers would walk into his life on a Tuesday night and completely dismantle the carefully constructed wall he'd spent 20 years building around himself. Nobody warned the boy either. But then, the most important things that ever happened to us never come announced. The night Jaewon Park turned 8 years old, the city of Seoul did what it always did. It kept moving. Buses groaned up steep hills. Convenience stores buzzed under cold fluorescent light. Street vendors stirred soup that had been simmering since before some of the customers were born. The city had no interest in the small domestic catastrophe unfolding on Bukhansan Ridge. No interest in the boy now sprinting down Inouadong Street with tears cutting clean lines down his dusty face, and absolutely no interest in the fact that he was about to collide, at full running speed, with the single most dangerous man in the eastern corridor of organized crime. The city just kept moving. Jaewon had dressed carefully that evening. That detail matters. His late mother, Soo-yeon, had believed with quiet ferocity that how you presented yourself to the world was a form of self-respect, and that self-respect was non-negotiable regardless of circumstances. So even at 8, even going to retrieve a toy car from a father who mostly remembered he had a son when guilt got loud enough, Jaewon had put on his school vest, buttoned his collar, and smoothed his trousers. He looked like a small person who had somewhere important to be. He had no idea how important it would turn out to be. The bus ride up the hill had taken 11 minutes. He'd counted. He'd also rehearsed what he would say, polite, brief, transactional. "Annyeonghaseyo. I left my red car here 3 weeks ago. May I have it, please?"
Clean.
Dignified. His mother would have approved. What his mother would not have approved of, what no reasonable person could have anticipated, was arriving at the mansion to find the front gate standing open like an invitation, and the interior arranged like the opening scene of a television drama nobody asked to be cast in. He'd heard them before he saw them. 2 voices, both controlled in the way that voices get controlled when the alternative is screaming, and screaming would mean losing, which neither woman was prepared to do. He'd rounded the corner from the entrance hall into the foyer and found them. Yeon-hee, his father's wife, whom he'd met twice at formal dinners and who had looked through him both times like he was a window rather than a person, and Soo-ah, his father's other arrangement, whom he'd never met but recognized immediately from the photo on the phone his father had left unlocked one careless afternoon. Both women had turned to look at him at the same moment. The specific silence that followed was the kind that has weight. You could have put it on a scale. He'd opened his mouth to deliver his rehearsed speech. He'd gotten as far as "Annyeong," half a word, really just a small breath of greeting, before Yeon-hee had set down her crystal glass with the careful precision of a woman deciding not to throw it and said, with a scalpel's clean economy, "You need to leave this house." Soo-ah had been less architectural.
Out. Now.
"Your father isn't here. Go." 2 sharp claps. Pointed fingers. The international gesture for, "You are a problem I am actively removing." She had pointed at the door with the specific energy of a woman who had used up every reserve of composure she'd arrived with and had nothing left to spend on gentleness. 4 seconds. Jaewon stood his ground for 4 full seconds, long enough to be a choice rather than a flinch, and then he ran. Past the koi pond.
Past the garden.
Through the gate that had seemed like a mercy when it was open, and now felt like a mouth that had swallowed him. Down the hill into the city's indifferent arms, running fast and running blind, because when you are 8 years old and every adult in the vicinity has just confirmed that your existence is an inconvenience, your legs tend to make decisions your mind hasn't caught up to yet. He didn't see the man. Not until he hit him. One moment there was pavement and streetlight and the blur of his own speed. The next there was an impact, cedar and cold metal and black fabric, and then the hard pavement rising to meet his palms, and then stillness, and then a voice from somewhere above him, low and without alarm, that said, "You're bleeding." Jaewon looked up. The man looking down at him was not someone you forgot. Kwon Sung-hyun had not become the most feared man in Seoul's eastern corridor by being careless with his attention. He gave it rarely and deliberately, the way a judge signs a verdict, final, considered irreversible. He had given it to rivals, to negotiations, to the precise geography of power. He had never, in 41 years of living, given it to a crying child in a school vest.
Until now.
He crouched slowly, the way large structures settle, with authority, without rush, and studied the boy with the same focused stillness he brought to everything.
Small.
8, maybe 9. School clothes, which meant someone had taught him that dignity was worth dressing for. Bleeding palm. Tear-stained face, carrying the specific expression of someone who had decided they were done crying and was now simply processing. The boy looked back at him without flinching, which was interesting. Most grown men flinched. Behind Sung Hyun, his bodyguard Taeyong made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. The involuntary exhale of a man who has seen his employer face down rival bosses, police commissioners, and one genuinely unhinged arms dealer from Busan, and is now watching him crouch on a pavement for a child. Sung Hyun ignored him. 2 women, the boy said abruptly, because apparently the story had been waiting at the exit and needed no further invitation. One is his wife. One is the other one. They both kicked me out. I only wanted my car. A pause. A red Porsche. Die-cast. My mother gave it to me. Sung Hyun looked at him for a long moment. The boy did not elaborate, did not soften, did not perform distress for sympathy. He stated facts. Just the facts, in the order they had occurred, like a small exhausted journalist filing a report from a war zone he hadn't signed up to cover. Where is your father? Sung Hyun asked. Not there, Jae-won said. The 2 words contained a biography. Sung Hyun stood. He reached into his jacket. The boy's eyes tracked the movement with wide, careful attention, the kind that had learned to watch hands, and produced a folded white handkerchief. Monogrammed. He pressed it against the boy's bleeding palm, firm and without ceremony. Hold that, he said. Then, come. He walked toward the pojangmaka without waiting because, in his experience, instructions that required explanation were instructions that had already failed. The boy followed. Taeyong followed the boy, maintaining the expression of a man experiencing something he would describe later to his wife, and she would not believe. They sat at the low plastic table, the Mafia boss, the 8-year-old, and 2 bodyguards standing at a discreet distance, like very overdressed chaperones. The pojangmaka grandmother, a woman in her 70s who had been feeding Seoul's night people for 40 years and had conclusively stopped being surprised by any of them, set down 2 bowls of ramyeon, without comment. She glanced once at Sung Hyun's neck tattoo, then at Jae-won's school vest, and then back at her stove, because some combinations of people were simply beyond categorization and the soup still needed stirring. Jae-won ate. Sung Hyun watched him eat. Not intrusively, just with the quiet attention of someone recalibrating something internal they hadn't expected to need recalibrating. The boy finished his bowl. Looked up. Are you a bad person? He asked, with the directness only children and people with nothing left to lose manage. Sung Hyun considered the question with more seriousness than it typically received. That depends, he said, on who you ask. Jae-won nodded slowly, as if this was an acceptable and even reasonable answer. My mother said bad people don't buy you food. Sung Hyun said nothing. He signaled for a second bowl. Hyun-soo Park arrived at his mansion at 11:17 p.m. to find the aftermath of a situation that, even by his own impressive standards of personal chaos, was remarkably thorough. Yun-hee was in the east sitting room with a lawyer on speakerphone. This was not a good sign. Yun-hee only called her lawyer after 10 p.m. when the matter was beyond the reach of apology, and this particular lawyer had a reputation for being surgically precise with matrimonial assets. Suwa had already left, her departure logged by the security camera at 10:40. Luggage first, then herself, then a parting gesture toward the mansion's facade that the camera captured in unfortunate clarity. The head housekeeper, Mrs. O, a woman of 60 who had worked for the Park household for 11 years and had the internal composure of someone who had seen everything twice, met Hyun-soo at the door with the expression of a person who has been waiting to deliver bad news and has rehearsed the delivery extensively. Your son was here, she said. Hyun-soo stopped walking. Jae-won. He came for his toy car. A pause, measured as a metronome. He was asked to leave. The silence that followed was the kind that arrives when a man is forced to see, in a single sentence, the full architecture of his failures. Hyun-soo was not a man incapable of shame. He was simply a man who had been very strategic about when he allowed himself to feel it. Tonight, that strategy collapsed entirely. "Where is he now?" he asked. Mrs. O's expression said, "That is exactly the right question, and the fact that you don't know the answer is exactly the problem." What she said aloud was, "He ran, sir." Down the hill. Hyun-soo was already moving. 2 kilometers downhill, in the warm fog of the Pojangmaka, Jae-won had finished his second bowl and was now engaged in the most honest conversation Kwon Sung-hyun had participated in for approximately a decade. It had begun, as honest conversations often do, without permission. "Do you have children?" Jae-won asked.
No.
"Why not?" "Because my life is not suitable for children." Sung-hyun said it simply, without self-pity, as a man states a weather condition. "It is raining. My life is not suitable for children." Both equally factual. Jae-won considered this. "My father's life is suitable for children," he said. "He just doesn't act like it is." He picked up his chopsticks, remembered the bowl was empty, and set them down again. "My mother said he was like a good jacket that doesn't fit anymore. You don't throw it away. You just stop expecting it to keep you warm." Taeyong, standing 4 feet away, looked at the middle distance with the expression of a man being ambushed by feelings he had not budgeted for. Sung-hyun looked at the boy for a long moment. "She sounds like she was very wise." "She was," Jae-won said, with the clean grief of someone who has already cried everything out and is now just carrying the fact of it. "She died 14 months ago. I counted." He looked up. "Do you count things?" "Yes," Sung-hyun said. Because he did. He counted everything: territory, leverage, debts, risk. He had simply never considered that grief could be counted too, and that a child doing so was not morbid but methodical. A small act of control in a life, where control kept slipping away. He was still thinking about this when the Pojangmaka grandmother tapped his shoulder and pointed down the street. A man in a disheveled suit was running toward them, shouting a name. Sung-hyun recognized the name. He had heard it twice tonight already. He looked at Jae-won. Jae-won had gone very still. "That's my father," the boy said. His voice was careful, neutral. The voice of someone who has learned not to feel things too quickly about this particular person. Sung-hyun stood slowly, straightened his jacket, and turned to face the running man with the full, unhurried weight of his attention. Hyun-soo Park was not a small man, but he arrived at that Pojangmaka table looking extraordinarily small. Breathless, tie loosened, the expensive suit doing nothing to disguise the fact that he was a man who had been running, not just tonight, but for years, and had finally run out of road. He saw Jae-won first. The relief on his face was genuine. Then he saw who was sitting across from his son, and the relief underwent a rapid and comprehensive transformation into something considerably less comfortable. Kwon Sung-hyun had that effect on people. "Jae-won," Hyun-soo started. "He's fine," Sung-hyun said. Not reassuringly. Just factually, the way you'd confirm a weather report. "Sit down." It was not phrased as a request. Hyun-soo sat down. The Pojangmaka grandmother appeared with barley tea, looked at the assembled table, crime boss, estranged father, small boy, 2 bodyguards, and retreated without a word, because 60 years of living had given her an excellent instinct for which situations benefited from her absence. Sung-hyun looked at Hyun-soo with the particular quality of attention that had, over the years, convinced 17 different men to make substantially better decisions than they'd originally planned. "Your son," he said slowly, "came to your house tonight for a toy car his dead mother gave him. He was removed by 2 women, both of whom, I understand, are your responsibility."
He paused.
"He ran down a hill alone in the dark. He is 8 years old." Each sentence landed like something being placed on a scale. By the end, the scale was not balanced in Hyun-soo's favor. Hyun-soo opened his mouth, then closed it, then looked at Jae-won, who was looking back at him with an expression no parent should ever have to receive from their child. Not angry, not sad, just watching. Waiting to see who his father would decide to be in the next 60 seconds. "I didn't know he was coming," Hyun-soo said finally. He came for a toy car, Sung-hyun repeated, with the measured patience of a man prepared to repeat this fact as many times as necessary for it to fully arrive. He put on his good clothes because his mother taught him to face important things properly dressed. He is 8. And he was alone. The words didn't fill the air so much as occupy it, the way certain truths do, not loud, not dramatic, just immovable. Hyun-soo looked at his son. Jae-won. His voice broke on the second syllable. Not performance. Just fracture. I'm sorry. Jae-won said nothing for a moment. Then, did you burn my car? A beat. Despite everything, the bodyguards, the tension, the weight of accumulated failure pressing down on the table, Taeyong made the sound again. The almost laugh. He turned it into a cough with the dedication of a professional. Hyun-soo reached slowly into his jacket pocket and produced a battered red die-cast Porsche. He had gone back inside for it before running down the hill. That, more than the apology, more than the running, more than anything he might say tonight, was the thing Sung-hyun noted. The man had remembered the car. Perhaps there was something retrievable here after all. Jae-won took the car, turned it over in his hands, inspected it with the solemn thoroughness of a curator confirming an artifact's authenticity. Then he set it on the table and looked at his father. Sit properly, Jae-won said. My mother said you face important things properly. Hyun-soo straightened. Across the table, something shifted almost imperceptibly in Kwon Sung-hyun's expression. Not quite a smile, but the structural precondition for one. The grandmother reappeared. Set down another bowl of ramen in front of Hyun-soo without being asked. Caught Sung-hyun's eye briefly. He gave the smallest nod. She went back to her stove, satisfied. Some tables, she knew, needed feeding more than others. The pojangmaka had developed its own atmosphere by now, the kind that settles over a table when the people sitting at it have stopped performing and started being honest. The soup steam rose in lazy columns. The city continued its indifferent business beyond the plastic curtain. And 3 people sat in the specific silence of a conversation that had already said the important things and was now deciding what to do with them. Hyun-soo ate his ramen without tasting it. This was evident from the mechanical way he lifted and lowered his chopsticks, the way a man eats when his mouth is occupied, but his mind is somewhere else entirely, somewhere up a hill, replaying an 11-year sequence of small abandonments that had accumulated, without his full attention, into something a child had to run down a hill to escape. Jae-won ate his third bowl. He was 8. The ramen was good. Some things were simple. Sung-hyun drank his barley tea and watched Hyun-soo with the unhurried patience of a man who had conducted many difficult conversations in his life and had learned that the most productive thing you could do in the early stages was nothing. Let the silence work. Silence was underrated. It asked questions that words couldn't. It was Jae-won who broke it, because Jae-won, as the evening had thoroughly established, operated without the social filters adults spent decades constructing. A bog, he said, the formal word, the careful word, the word with distance built into it. Do you know what my mother's last gift to me was? Hyun-soo looked at the red car sitting on the table between them. The Porsche, he said quietly. No. Jae-won set down his chopsticks with the deliberateness of someone making a point. She told me that people show you who they are in small moments, not big ones. She said big moments are easy. Anyone can show up for a birthday or a hospital visit when it's obvious they should. She said watch the small moments. The ones people don't think you're paying attention for. The table was very quiet. I've been paying attention, Jae-won said. Not as an accusation.
Just as a fact.
Delivered with the clean precision of a child who had not yet learned that some truths are considered impolite to say out loud. Hyun-soo set down his chopsticks too. He pressed both hands flat on the table, a man trying to physically stabilize something internal. Jae-won. I'm not angry, Jae-won said, which was somehow worse than if he had been. I just wanted my car. And I wanted you to know that I notice. I always notice. Behind them, Taeyong was studying the middle distance with extraordinary focus. He had found a spot on the plastic curtain approximately 2 meters away and was giving it the kind of attention usually reserved for explosive devices. Sung-hyun put down his cup. He looked at Hyun-soo, not with judgment, because judgment was cheap and he'd never wasted money on cheap things, but with the specific directness of a man who had decided something and was now simply delivering it. "You have something most people in my world would trade everything they own for," he said. His voice was low, unhurried, the kind that filled space without raising itself. "A child who still came to find you. A child who dressed in his good clothes to come and get a toy car from your house, because his mother taught him that you face important things properly." A pause. "He faced you properly. The question is whether you'll do the same." Hyun-soo's jaw tightened. Not in anger, in the specific way of a man holding himself together at a fault line. "I don't know how to be what he needs," he said. The honesty of it was almost startling. Not an excuse. Just a man looking at his own hands and acknowledging that he wasn't sure what they were good for. "Then learn," Sung-hyun said. Simple. Final. The way men like him said things that weren't suggestions. And here, right here, at this table between soup and barley tea and a battered red toy car, is where the story asks you something. Because every one of us has been on one side of this table or the other. Either we are the child who dressed carefully and showed up anyway, or we are the parent who forgot to be present for the small moments until someone held a mirror up. If you believe every child deserves a parent who shows up, not just for the big moments, but for the Tuesday nights, the toy cars, the ordinary, unremarkable moments that turn out to be everything, comment below. And if you won't side with absence and excuses, hit subscribe. Only people who think Hyun-soo was fine won't. Jae-won picked up his red Porsche, turned it over once. Then, with great seriousness, he slid it across the table toward Sung-hyun.
"You can hold it," he said.
"Just for now. My mother said you can tell a lot about a person by how they hold something that matters." Sung-hyun looked at the small car for a moment. Then he picked it up, held it with both hands, carefully, the way you hold something borrowed and irreplaceable. Hyun-soo watched his son watch this man, and understood, with a full devastating clarity that comes too late and not late enough, exactly what kind of father he had failed to be, and exactly what kind of father he still had time to become. The grandmother refilled everyone's tea without being asked. She'd been doing this for 40 years. She knew which tables were turning points. The city was quieter now. Not silent. Seoul was never silent. It simply changed registers after midnight, swapping its daytime roar for something lower and more honest, the sound of a place that had stopped performing and was just existing. The Pojangmaka grandmother had begun wiping down the counter with the unhurried efficiency of a woman who would close when she was ready and not before, and whose definition of ready had nothing to do with the clock. Sung-hyun still held the red Porsche. He hadn't noticed he was turning it over in his fingers until Jae-won pointed it out. "You keep spinning it," the boy said, with the observational precision that had characterized everything he'd said that evening, and Sung-hyun looked down and found that he was. A small red die-cast car, paint worn at the edges, one wheel slightly looser than the others. The kind of object that meant nothing to anyone who didn't know its history, and everything to the one person who did. He set it down carefully in front of Jae-won. "It holds well," he said. Jae-won nodded, satisfied. Verdict confirmed. He pocketed the car with the solemnity of a judge returning an exhibit. Hyun-soo had been quiet for several minutes, the productive kind of quiet, not the evasive kind. Sung-hyun had learned to tell the difference. Evasive quiet looked outward, searched for exits, calculated deflections. Productive quiet looked inward and didn't enjoy what it found, but kept looking anyway. Hyun-soo was looking inward. It seemed to be going poorly, which meant it was going correctly. "I want to do better," Hyun-soo said finally. Not to Sung-hyun. To Jae-won. The distinction mattered, and he understood that it mattered, which was itself a small sign of something. "I know that's not enough to say. I know saying it doesn't fix the Tuesday nights I wasn't there, or the car I let sit in that house for 3 weeks, or tonight." He exhaled slowly. "But I want to. And I'm asking you, Jae-won, to let me try." Jae-won looked at his father for a long moment. The look of a child running calculations that no child should have to run. Weighing history against possibility. Measuring the man in front of him against the small moments his mother had told him to watch. "You came back," Jae-won said finally. "And you brought the car before you ran."
A pause.
That's a small moment. Hyun-soo blinked. Once. The specific blink of a man absorbing something that has gone directly past his defenses because it arrived too small and too true to be blocked. Your mother, he said softly, would have liked you very much. She did like me very much, Jae-won said, with a child's perfect literal logic. She was my mother. Taeyong turned away entirely. He appeared to be examining the street with great urgency. His shoulders were doing something complicated. Sung Hyun said nothing. He had said what needed saying. The rest of this belonged to a father and a son, and he was neither, and he understood the geography of things that were not his. But then Jae-won turned to him. Directly, fully, with the undeflectable attention of a child who has decided you are important. Will I see you again? He asked. The question was simple. The weight of it was not. Sung Hyun had spent 20 years building a life that was not suitable for children. He had said so himself, stated it as plainly as weather. He had 12 men who would die for him. He had power, territory, and the kind of reputation that made rooms rearrange themselves when he entered. He had not, before tonight, had a small person look at him and ask a question that assumed he was worth returning to. He looked at the boy for a long moment, looked at the empty ramen bowl, the monogrammed handkerchief still loosely wrapped around a small scraped palm. If your father brings you, he said carefully, I will be here. It was not a promise of transformation. It was not a declaration. It was simply a door left open, the width of a child's hand, by a man who had kept every door in his life locked for so long he'd forgotten what open felt like. Hyun-soo looked at Sung Hyun. Something passed between them, not warmth exactly, but understanding. The understanding of two men who had both failed, in different magnitudes and different ways, to be present for something that deserved presence, and were now, separately and together, deciding to try the other direction. I'll bring him, Hyun-soo said. The grandmother appeared one final time. She set down a small plate of tteok, rice cakes, white and plain, the kind she made for herself at the end of long nights. She placed it in the center of the table without a word and walked back to her counter. It was the highest honor she dispensed. Sung Hyun had eaten here for 6 years, and she had never once given him tteok. He looked at Jae-won. Jae-won was already eating one. It's good, the boy reported. You should have one. So Kwon Sung Hyun, feared, deliberate, the most dangerous man in Seoul's eastern corridor, took a rice cake from the plate and ate it at a plastic table at midnight, across from a man learning to be a father and beside a boy who had come out looking for a toy car and found something none of them had known was missing. Nobody had warned any of them that this was coming. But then, the most important things never arrive announced. They arrive the way Jae-won had, running, a little breathless, dressed in their good clothes, ready to face something important. The city exhaled around them, low and unhurried, and for one small moment in its enormous ongoing story, it held this table a little closer than the rest. And that was enough. That was more than enough.